Hello, everybody. Okay, let me just get to YouTube Studio. We're going to go through the read-through of this new information. That was released for Brian Laundrie. And let me just get into the live chat here. Okay, hi, Whisper to Me. Let me just go over here and close these windows down. Okay, so the Sarasota Medical Examiner's Office has released the official autopsy report for Brian Laundrie, and it's going to reveal new details into his death. We're going to read through this right here. And it was conducted by District 12 Deputy Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Wilson Broussard. Okay, so let's take a look at this information. Here we have it over here on the screen. You should be able to see it. Let me make it a little larger just in case you're reading along with us. Let me make sure that's showing up. Okay, good. Hi, Deb on the Move. Hi, Carol Boyce. Hi, Carolyn Parrish. Hi, Star Pixie's mom. Hi, Sherry Shirley. All right, so District 12 Medical Examiner, Sarasota, Florida. And this is regarding Brian Laundrie. Included in this packet are the following medical examiner reports and related documents. So number 1 is the investigator case summary, 5 pages. Number 2 is the medical examiner report of scene investigation, 4 pages. Number 3 is the medical examiner report of the autopsy, 6 pages. Number 4 is the consultation report of the osteological examination, 23 pages. Number 5 is the laboratory report, the DNA analysis, 5 pages, and 6 is the consultation, 2 pages. Okay, pages 6 through 11 have been redacted. Okay, and that is the Florida Statute 406-135 explicitly prohibits the release of autopsy photos by the medical examiner as part of routine public records requests. Accordingly, the photographs that were part of the original report, pages 6 through 11, have been redacted. Good, because I don't want to see them anyway. Okay, so we have Brian Christopher Laundrie, found October 20th, 2021, age 23. Okay, medical examiner Wilson A. Broussard Jr., MD, investigator Ronald L. Busby Jr., white male, as for Brian. Okay, and here's the synopsis here. On October 20th, 2021 at 9:30, I was contacted by Sergeant Fortuno from the Northport Police Department in reference to an apparent human skeletal remains. The remains were discovered in the Carlton Reserve, north of the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park, located at 6968 Reisterstown Road in Northport. Sergeant Fortuno advised me that a massive search had been ongoing in the Carlton Reserve for several weeks by multiple agencies for 23-year-old white male Brian Christopher Laundrie, date of birth November 18th, 1997. On October 20th, 2021, at approximately 8:20 hours, search groups found a backpack and shoes that were identified as belonging to Brian Laundrie. The personal belongings were surrounded by apparent skeletal remains, human remains, that were scattered on top of the dirt ground. I was informed that the evidence response team from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, along with cadaver and electronic detection dogs, were responding to the scene to assist in locating additional human remains. I contacted Dr. Vega, Dr. Broussard, Director Winterhalter, and Chief Investigator Andrus, and provided them with the above information. At 12:45 hours, same date, I was contacted by Detective Keller from the Northport Police Department, who advised that he was the lead investigator for their agency. The apparent human remains were located at latitude 27.127698 north and longitude negative 82.192652 west, which was within the Carlton Reserve. At 1400 hours, same date, Director Winterhalter contacted the forensic odontologist Dr. Nancy Havens and requested forensic odontology consultation for October 21st, 2021. At 16:05 hours the same date, I was contacted by Sergeant Fortuno, who advised that they were requesting the Office of the District 12 Medical Examiner to respond. At 16:20 hours, same date, Chief Investigator Andrus contacted Dr. Heather Walsh-Haney and Dr. Miranda Kless and requested an anthropology consultation to assist with the examination of the skeletal remains at the scene the following day. Okay, sorry about that. At 1700 hours, same date, Chief Investigator Andrus, Investigator Kavanagh, Investigator Loveridge, and I arrived on scene, and we were transported to the location of the apparent human remains. Upon arrival, we met with Carrie Harvey, team leader of the Federal Bureau of Investigation Evidence Response Team, who walked us through the scene. Team leader Harvey informed us that the search area was previously under approximately 3 feet of water, which was indicated by the water line upon the surrounding trees. The search area was divided into the main scene and a secondary scene. Both scenes were marked with orange flags that indicated apparent human and or animal remains and red flags that indicated personal effects. I photographed the scene as I observed with a Nikon digital camera. At 17:30 hours, same date, Dr. Vega and Dr. Broussard arrived on scene and examined the skeletal remains. Please refer to Dr. Broussard's report for further details. The scene was north of the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park within the Carlton Reserve and west of the Big Slough Canal. The scene included trees and overgrown vegetation that had total exposure to the outside elements. A winding walking and vehicular trail ran in a north-northeast direction up to and through the scene. The skeletal remains and personal effects were in plain sight and scattered upon the dirt ground. The main scene contained human remains that included a right and left scapula, a right humerus, a left and right femur, 2 tibias, 2 fibulas, 2 clavicles, 2 pelvis, and 1 right ulna, 1 right radius, a sacrum, multiple ribs, multiple skull fragments, along with the maxilla and mandible, and approximately 25 vertebrae, cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. Dr. Broussard confirmed the remains in this area to be human. The main scene also contained personal effects that included a pair of green shorts with a green belt, 2 slip-on shoes, a backpack with unknown contents, a white metal ring, and an unknown type of handgun, snub nose revolver. The secondary scene contained skeletal animal remains, a handwritten half note, and a hat with the logo Moab Coffee Roasters. I was informed that a dry bag was located that contained a journal, along with a wooden box that contained a small notebook and a photographic picture of Brian Laundrie. I was advised that there were additional photographic pictures, but the contents were undisclosed to me at that time. At 2000 hours, same date, all personnel from the District 12 Medical Examiner cleared the scene. Investigator Kavanagh transported skeletal human remains that included cranial bones, maxilla with existing teeth, and mandible with existing teeth that were processed by the Evidence Response Team of the Federal Bureau of Investigation to the Sarasota Medical Examiner's facility for potential identification purposes. The remains were logged into the morgue at 2221 hours, same date. On October 21st, 2021 at 800 hours, Director Winterhalter met Dr. Nancy Havens, forensic odontologist, at the Sarasota Medical Examiner's facility to assist with the forensic odontology consultation. Please refer to her report for additional details. At 9:06 hours, same date, I contacted Dr. Udeshi from the Sayville Family Dentistry in New York, and requested that the decedent's dental records, radiographs, along with corresponding physician notes. I learned that agents with the Federal Bureau of Investigation were able to obtain the dental records, radiographs on behalf of the District 12 medical examiner. Upon receiving the records, radiographs, they were provided to Dr. Havens. At 10:10 hours, same date, I was contacted by Detective Keller, who advised that they believed they located additional bones from the decedent's left arm bones within the main scene. At 1300 hours, same date, Chief Investigator Andrus, Investigator Walker, and I arrived on scene. At 1300 hours, same date, forensic anthropologist Dr. Walsh Haney and Dr. Claes arrived on the scene, at which time they were walked through the scene. At 13:15 hours, same date, Dr. Broussard arrived on the scene. We made contact with Kerry Harvey, team leader of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Evidence Response Team, who advised that the main scene was divided into 3 zones, which were designated for sifting purposes in search for additional human remains. Zone 1 contained remains of the upper torso, upper extremities, and head. Zone 2 contained remains of the lower vertebrae and sacrum. Zone 3 contained remains of the left arm bones. A systematic search was conducted by all agencies involved for the recovery of additional human remains. At 16:05 hours, same date, I contacted the Brisota Services and requested removal of the remains from the scene to the Sarasota Medical Examiner facility. At 16:20 hours, same date, I was contacted by Director Winterhalter, who advised that forensic odontologist Dr. Nancy Havens positively identified the human remains as 23-year-old white male Brian Christopher Laundrie, date of birth November 18, 1997, through the comparison of the antemortem dental radiographs and dentition, including post-mortem radiographs, to known dental records. At 16:25 hours, same date, a projectile was found near Zone 2 of the main scene by the evidence recovery team of the Federal Bureau of Investigation by utilizing a metal detector. All additional human and animal remains, along with personal effects, were collected and inventoried on-site by the evidence response team of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Please refer to the reports from the Northport Police Department reference case number 21-054011 and the Federal Bureau of Investigation reference case. Okay, we don't need them. For further details, the Federal Bureau of Investigation case represented a crime on government reservation and crime of violence that involved the decedent. At 1700 hours, same date, forensic anthropologist Dr. Walsh Haney and Dr. Claes cleared the scene. At 17:45 hours, same date, Dr. Broussard, Chief Investigator Andrus, Investigator Walker, and I cleared the scene. Dr. Broussard advised that a skeletal examination and inventory would be scheduled for October 22nd, 2021. On October 22nd, 2021, at 900 hours, Dr. Vega, Dr. Broussard, Dr. Claes, Investigator Rogers, and I met with Dr. Walsh Haney at the Sarasota Medical Examiner facility to conduct an inventory and photograph the skeletal remains with a Nikon digital camera. Please refer to Dr. Walsh Haney's report for further details. Dr. Walsh Haney transported the remains to the office of the District 20 Medical Examiner for anthropological examination and reconstruction. Detective Keller and lead agent Bush, Federal Bureau of Investigation, arrived at the Sarasota Medical Examiner facility, and Detective Keller reported that the decedent's sister informed that the decedent was right-hand dominant. Detective Keller informed us that the decedent was last known alive on September 13, 2021, when he left his residence to go hiking in the Carlton Reserve, but the decedent did not return home. On September 14, 2021, the decedent's vehicle was located in the parking lot of the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park. On September 17, 2021, the decedent was reported to the Northport Police Department as a missing person. During this time period, it rained for several days, which caused portions of the Carlton Reserve to be flooded. On October 7, 2021, the flooding receded to the point where the Carlton Reserve was hikeable again. On October 26, 2021 at 1200 hours, I contacted the decedent's parents, Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, and explained that District 12 medical examiner's involvement. I directed Mr. and Mrs. Laundrie to contact the Northport Police Department and the Federal Bureau of Investigation for further information in regards to the autopsy results and additional investigative information. Mr. and Mrs. Laundrie informed me that their son was very healthy and had no known medical history. The decedent did not take any medications and had no known primary care physician. When I asked about the decedent's social history, Mr. and Mrs. Laundrie stated that they did not want to provide that information. At 13:26 hours, same date, I was contacted by Detective Keller, who advised that lead agent Bush from the Federal Bureau of Investigation notified him that the firearm collected at the scene was evaluated. The firearm was a European American Arms .38 Special on barrel, .357 Magnum, other side of barrel. Based upon the markings and appearance, the firearm was a Windicator revolver. The cylinder contained 2 live rounds and 1 spent round of ammunition. On November 9th, 2021, at 1100 hours, Dr. Walsh Haney returned the decedent's remains to the office of the District 12 medical examiner. I photographed the reconstructed remains with a Nikon digital camera. On November 11th, 2021, at 10:30 hours, at the request of the Federal Bureau of Investigation personnel, 2 sections of the femur bone and a tooth molar were retained for DNA analysis, and they were transported to the Pinellas County Forensic Laboratory and delivered by myself at 10:55 hours, same date. On November 19th, 2021, at 13:13 hours, I received a laboratory report DNA analysis via electronic email from Tina Jastrzembski of the Pinellas County Forensic Laboratory. The notification was a confirmation on the identity of the human skeletal remains on this case, and the remains were identified as 23-year-old white male Brian Christopher Laundrie, date of birth November 18, 1997. The notification was signed by Beth Ordeman, DNA analyst. The above additional information was immediately provided to Dr. Vega and Dr. Broussard for further review. On November 22nd, 2021, at 9:40 hours, I contacted lead agent Bush and discussed the decedent's positive identification through DNA analysis. At 1200 hours, same date, I contacted Detective Keller and discussed the decedent's positive identification through DNA analysis. And on November 23rd, 2021, at 12:50 hours, I contacted the decedent's parents, Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, and discussed their son's death certificate certification. Investigator Ronald L. Busby, Jr. Okay, again, this is the scene investigation 10/20/21 and 10/21/2021, Carlton Reserve 6968, Reisterstown Road, Northport, Florida. Time arrived at scene 10/20/21 at 17:30 hours and 10/21/21 at 13:15 hours. Law enforcement agencies, the Northport Police Department, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Lead investigators, Detective Keller of Northport Police Department, Special Agent Loretta Bush of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Northport Police Department contacted on-call investigator Ron Busby at 9:30 hours on October 20th, indicating that they believe that the remains of the missing individual, Brian Christopher Laundrie, had been found in an area where searches had been initiated several weeks prior. Reportedly in the morning hours, Northport Police Department had groups of personnel that discovered bones and personal belongings consistent with Brian C. Laundrie. The Federal Bureau of Investigation Evidence Response Team, along with cadaver dogs and other search groups, were continuing to lay out the area where the remains were found. Our assistance was not requested at this point. Later in the day, at 16:05 hours, Investigator Busby was contacted to request our response to the scene. The remains were reportedly located at a latitude of blah, 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 and longitude of blah, 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 inside the Carlton Reserve. We were told to meet at the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park. Upon arrival at the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park, police personnel transported us approximately 1 mile from the environmental park entrance into the Carlton Reserve where the remains had been found. Day 1. Observation of surroundings and remains. The late afternoon is warm and dry. We are transported from the park entrance to the scene at the above listed coordinates in an ATV which ultimately headed in north-northeast direction for approximately a mile. The scene is a wooded, low-lying area with multiple patches of trees with underbrush mixed with some areas of open canopy. The ground is moderately dry, with lower areas having both damp and wet spots. Upon arrival at the scene, several tarps and canopies have been set up by law enforcement agencies. We are briefed at the scene by Detective Keller of the Northport Police Department along with Kerry Harvey, the leader of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Evidence Response Team. We are told upon arrival that the area where the remains have been located was previously under up to and possibly more than 3 feet of water for an extended period of time. Initially, the search area had been divided into a main scene, above listed coordinates, and secondary scene, generally 100 to 250 feet east of the main scene. Human remains, animal remains, and evidence had been marked with labeled flags for documentation. Adjacent to the main scene area, a small, currently dry stream bed was a slightly but noticeably deeper elevation is oriented in a general east-west direction. Walking the main scene area with Detective Keller disclosed human remains including the right and left scapula, right humerus, right femur, 2 tibia, 2 fibula, 2 clavicles, 2 pelvic bones, the sacrum, 1 right ulna, 1 right radius, and multiple ribs. Also, multiple fragments of cranium and skull, along with a generally intact mandible with attached teeth, and the lower aspect of the maxilla with attached teeth are noted. Cervical, thoracic, and lumbar vertebrae are also located nearby. Within the main scene area, several personnel effects are pointed out, including a pair of green shorts in the leaf debris approximately 20 feet south from the cranial fragments previously described, 2 slip-on shoes approximately 10 feet apart from each other, a white metal ring, and a short barrel revolver handgun with extensive rust are noted on the ground near the previously described cranial fragments. Within 10 to 20 feet west of the larger cranial fragments is a green backpack with associated gear, including a tent and flares. The tent was still in the backpack and was not set up, pitched. Approximately 250 feet east is what was initially designated the secondary scene area. Multiple animal bones are identified. A piece of paper and a red hat with the logo Moab Coffee Roasters are noted in a grassy area. We are informed that an apparent dry bag was located in another area, approximately 250 feet southwest of the main area, which contained a journal, along with a wooden box that contained a small notebook and photographs, Some of the photos include Brian Laundrie. Prior to leaving the scene, arrangements are made for human remains samples bags labeled HR1, HR3, HR2A, HR2B, HR4, HR5, and HR7 to be transported to the Sarasota Medical Examiner facility that night. HR1 contained the maxilla palate with 9 teeth, and HR2A contained the mandible with 15 teeth. These are to be examined as soon as arrangements can be made with our forensic odontologist for potential identification match. These evidence bags with the previously described labels are transported on 10/20/21 by investigator Kristen Kavanagh to the Sarasota Medical Examiner's facility. I cleared the scene from the park entrance at 2000 hours. See separate case summary report for positive identification information. Day 2. On 10/21/2021 at 1350, I arrived back at the scene, parking at the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park to be transported to the remains area. 15 minutes prior to my arrival, investigators Andrus, Walker, and Busby, along with forensic anthropologist Dr. Heather Walsh-Haney and Dr. Miranda Cleese, arrived on scene. The forensic anthropologists were invited at our request for assistance in identification and collection of any further human remains. The Federal Bureau of Investigation Evidence Response Team has collected all bones identified the evening prior and labeled them into evidence bags after documenting, logging, and photographing each bone and or evidence collected. Evidence markers and bags designated as HR contained remains preliminary identified as human. Team leader Harvey from the evidence response team advised that the initial main scene area, as discussed from the prior evening, has been divided into 3 zones, zones 1, 2, and 3. Zone 1 contained the remains including those of the upper torso, right upper and both lower extremities, and head. Zone 2 contained remains including several lower vertebrae and the sacrum. And Zone 3 had left upper extremity bones. A systematic research of all zones is conducted for additional human remains. In the north area of Zone 1, near the base of a large tree, and the dry east-west oriented creek bed near where the majority of the bones were found, including the cranial facial bones, the handgun, and a white metal ring, a surface dig is done by the medical examiner's investigators, forensic anthropologist, evidence response team, members, and myself. Each zone is excavated to approximately 6 centimeters using trowels and shovels. All the leaf debris and excavated dirt were placed into 5-gallon plastic buckets and then sifted through 1/4-inch screens onto a large blue tarpaulin which was set up nearby. This process led to them finding 9 additional cranial fragments, 2 upper central incisors, and 1 hand phalanx, all from Zone 1. These are added to the remains collected and logged in earlier. At approximately 16:25 hours, one of the members of the FBI evidence response team discovered a projectile with her metal detector approximately 50 to 60 feet south of the area where the skull fragments and handgun were initially located. This was in approximately 6 inches of dirt. Scene impressions, actions taken. The remainder of the skeletal remains are inventoried by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and packaged as evidence, released to the medical examiner, and transported back to the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park area. From the park staging area, packaged bags from scene day 2 included HR6 and HR103, with the exception of HR34 and HR35, which were confirmed as animal remains, are transported to the Sarasota Medical Examiner's facility by Risota Services for further information. The scene is consistent with skeletal remains of a single individual that appear consistent with a moderately young male. The cranial fragmentation and presence of a handgun are consistent with a gunshot injury of the head. Full Osteologic examination and cranial reconstruction will be performed to identify potential specific gunshot evidence. All non-human remains evidence is collected by the FBI for further workup evaluation. Overall documented geographic evidence with data point location diagrams and reports are to be completed by the FBI. I cleared the scene at 1745 from the park entrance. Note, the foregoing is a preliminary nature and subject to modifications pending additional information and/or investigation. William A. Broussard, Jr., M.D., Deputy Chief Medical Examiner, date 11/23/21. Then we have report of autopsy. Summary of autopsy skeletal remains findings. Skeletal remains single individual. A. Scattered remains, bones with soft tissue, most with post-mortem scavenging, carnivore activity, near complete skeleton. B. Positively identified with ante-mortem dental radiograph and record comparison. C. Gunshot wound of the head with extensive associated craniofacial fractures. Toxicology. Please refer to the separate toxicology report. Cause of death, gunshot wound of the head. Manner of death, suicide. Shot self with handgun. William A. Broussard, Jr., M.D., Deputy Chief Medical Examiner, 11/23/21. General description. The skeletal remains are consistent with a young adult male. The vast majority of the skeleton has been recovered. The level of skeletonization is generally complete, but for minimal areas of adiposity like white sheen on some of the vertebrae, no soft tissue remains, but for minimal, partially calcified costal cartilage at the anterior aspects of some of the lower ribs. Multiple long bones, including bones of the arms and legs, all disclose carnivore predation activity characterized by gnawing and chewing, mostly on the distal ends of the long bones. Okay, so his bones were showing signs that some animal, carnivore, had gnawed at them. Okay. The cranium is in multiple pieces and fragments, as will be described below. Most of the bones have dark discoloration consistent with the dark soil material where the bones were recovered. Skeletal inventory. Bones are designated HR1. HR human remains through HR 103 as packaged by the Evidence Response Team of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The only exceptions to a routine chronological numbering system are: 1, there is an HR2A and an HR2B designation, and 2, an HR34 and HR35 were initially designated as human remains but were later confirmed as non-human remains, and they were kept by the FBI Evidence Response Team at the recovery scene. HR 81 and 82 are non-human remains, non-human ribs, confirmed as such during autopsy skeletal survey examination. HR 1 has right and left maxilla with the right and left palatine bones initially examined with 9 teeth. HR 2A, the mandible with 15 teeth. HR 2B, the left sphenoid bone with portion of the temporal bone fragmented. HR 3, the occipital cranial piece with some left parietal bone attached. HR 4, cranial piece with portions of the left and right parietal bone, occipital bone, right temporal bone, and sphenoid bones. Okay. HR 5, the frontal bone fragment with some partial left and right parietal bones. HR 7, portion of the frontal bone with left parietal bones attached. HR 6, the left scapula. HR 8, the left clavicle. HR 9, the right hand metacarpal. HR 10, the cervical vertebrae. 7, the HR 11, intermediate hand flanges. HR 12, single cervical vertebrae, 3 to 6. HR 13, proximal hand flanks. and HR 14, HR 15, HR 16, 3 left ribs, HR 17, the partial right maxilla with right sphenoid and right temporal bone, and portions of the right zygomatic bone as a single skull fragment. HR 18, single right rib. HR 19, HR 20, HR 21, 3 left ribs. HR 22, the sphenoid bone fragment. HR 23, the single right rib. HR 24, the right first rib, 2 other right ribs, and the manubrium sternum. HR 25 and HR 26 are single right ribs. The HR 27, intermediate hand flanks. HR 28, right metacarpal bone. HR 29 and HR 30, the 2 pelvic bones, left and right, coxae respectively. The left rib is HR 31, the right metacarpal, HR 32, 2 right ribs in the sternal body is HR 33, HR 36, HR 37, HR 38, HR 39, HR 40 are all individual cervical vertebrae. HR 41, HR 42, HR 43 are individual left ribs. HR 44 is the proximal foot flanks. HR 45 is the right first metatarsal. HR 46 is the left calcaneus. HR 47, HR 48, proximal and intermediate hand flanges. HR 49, the right 12th rib. HR 50, right rib. HR 51, the left rib. HR 52, HR 53, HR 54, HR 55, 6 thoracic vertebrae. Okay. HR 56, thoracic vertebrae 12, and the lumbar vertebrae 1, 2, and 3. HR 57, HR 58, the right metatarsals. HR 59, the left metatarsal. HR 60, the lumbar vertebrae 5. HR 61, the lumbar vertebrae 3 and 4. Okay. HR 62, the right clavicle. HR 63, the right rib. HR 64, the thoracic vertebrae 11, and 2 other thoracic vertebrae to be designated. HR 65, thoracic vertebrae 9 and 10. HR 66, the sacrum with the coccyx. HR 67, proximal hand phalanx. HR 68, the metacarpal. HR 69, the right radius. HR 70, the right ulna. HR 71, HR 72, metacarpal and metatarsal, respectively. HR 73, the fibula. HR 74, the cuneiform bone. HR 75, the metacarpal. HR 76, metatarsal. HR 77, the right femur. HR 78, the fibula. HR 79, the right tibia. HR 80, the left femur. HR 81 and HR 82, non-human ribs. HR 83, the right humerus. HR 84, proximal hand phalanx. HR 85, the left ulna. HR 86, the left humerus. HR 87, the left tibia. HR 88, the right scapula. HR 89, the left radius. HR 90, cranial fragments. HR 91, cranial fragments. HR 92, cranial fragments. HR 93, the left first rib. HR 94, cranial piece with nasal, maxillary, and left zygomatic bone fragments. HR 95 and HR 96, cranial fragments. HR 97, the temporal cranial fragment. HR 98, HR 99, HR 100, cranial fragments. HR 101, left temporal cranial fragment. HR 102, multiple cranial fragments. HR 103, multiple cranial fragments, 2 upper incisors, and 1 distal hand phalanx. Radiographs disclose no metallic fragments or densely radiopaque material consistent with foreign bodies. In summary, the vast majority of the skeleton is recovered. The cranium is extensively fragmented, with the mandible generally intact and the lower aspect of the maxilla generally intact, each with some teeth present as described. Missing bones include 1 mandibular tooth, 5 maxillary teeth, up to 5 craniofacial bone fragments with a moderately large area of the left temporal, lower left parietal, and superior wing of the left sphenoid bone. Also absent are the hyoid bone and the thyroid and cricoid cartilages. The xiphoid process is absent. The ethmoid and lacrimal bones are absent, as are the patella. For completeness and quantity of tarsals, metatarsals, phalanges, and all bones, please refer to the separate osteologic examination. As previously mentioned, evidence of injury, peri and postmortem. As previously mentioned, skeletonization, total soft tissue decomposition, and moderate to extensive animal predation are noted. Most of the distal long bones have moderately extensive carnivore activity, evidenced by multiple gouging and gnawing marks. These areas are consistent with carnivores and/or omnivores, including canines such as feral dogs and coyotes, along with rodents and raccoons. The cranium will be reconstructed for further evaluation, along with a full osteologic exam for more precise changes and examination. The extensive fragmentation will be with comminuted intersecting skull fractures is consistent with a gunshot wound of the head. Post-reconstruction cranial examination 11/9/2021. The cranial bones recovered including 27 cranial fragments of various sizes along with the mandible have been reconstructed. 8 additional small fragments, thin sinus fragments, were not reconstructed. The reconstructed skull is near complete, having the majority of the major cranial bones, and creates a clear picture of perimortem trauma to be described below. Evidence of injury. Perforating gunshot wound of the head. In summary, extensive fracturing including comminuted and intersecting linear and basilar fractures with associated cranial fragmentation is consistent with a gunshot wound trauma. Evidence of a single perforating gunshot wound entering the left temporal cranium and exiting the right middle inferior parietal cranium just above the temporal bone squamous suture is identified. The gunshot wound enters the left side of the head, causing an area of extensive fracturing where the majority of the temporal bone is absent, along with extreme inferior aspects of the left parietal bone and portions of the posterior left sphenoid wing. A 5.5 by 5.0 centimeter area of bone defect absence is noted without a definitive circular or semicircular defect and/or beveling due to bone absence. The presumed exact entrance point is centered in this defect and is estimated at approximately 5.8 centimeters below the top of the cranium, 5.5 centimeters above the left external auditory canal, and 6.0 centimeters left of midline. The exit wound is located on the right middle inferior parietal bone, just above the apex of the temporal bone, and is measured 4.5 centimeters below the top of the cranium, 5.5 centimeters above the right external auditory canal, and 6.0 centimeters right of midline. The exit perforation is near circumferential, measures 11 to 12 millimeters in diameter, inner table, and has a clear outer table beveling. No gunfire associated bone discoloration, soot, or lead wipe are noted. On the superior aspect on the exit wound is a 1.0 by 0.7 centimeter missing fragment of parietal bone. Therefore, the overall pathway or trajectory of the gunshot wound is left to right, very slightly upward, and having little to no significant front-back deviation. Associated fractures descriptions. Associated with the gunshot wound are multiple linear intersecting fractures, including a 5.0 centimeter fracture from the entrance fracture defect to the superior left orbit, a 19 centimeter linear fracture from the upper left sphenoid bone across the left frontal bone, across the coronal suture, and ends as it intersects a fracture at the medial posterior left parietal bone. 3. Small radiating fractures emanating from the entrance defect are noted of the adjacent left parietal bone. 4. A 17 centimeter linear fracture is noted on the upper posterior aspect of the entrance fracture defect, crossing the mid-parietal bones through the sagittal suture and ultimately intersecting fractures associated with the exit defect on the right parietal bone. 5. An 18 centimeter linear fracture intersects the above described 17 centimeter parietal fracture on the left mid-parietal area and continues medially and inferiorly through the lambdoidal struck suture left of the midline, ultimately to the medial basilar aspect of the left occipital bone. 6. On the right side of the cranium adjacent to the exit defect are 3 centimeters to 5 centimeters radiating fractures above posterior and anterior to the perforation of the right inferior mid-parietal bone. 7. A partly elevated 4.2 by 2.2 centimeter wedged fracture is adjacent and superior to a large linear fracture which intersects the posterior right squamous suture, crosses the mid-parietal bone, crosses the coronal suture, and ends near the right superior orbital area. 8. Other fractures include 9.5 and 7.5 centimeter fractures on the right frontal bone, which communicate with the previously described right parietal frontal fracture. 9. The nasal bone is horizontally fractured, and a piece of the right sphenoid bone is absent. Specimens: costochondral cartilage and a femoral bone segment with associated internal marrow are sent for potential toxicology analysis. Femoral bone segments and a molar tooth are retained for law enforcement for potential DNA analysis. For a complete anthropological examination, please refer to the separate attached osteologic examination report. Okay, so this is the toxicology testing results. Brian Laundrie, comprehensive drug screen, bone, right proximal femur, result none detected, and then the other costal cartilage, none detected. Report of the osteological examination. On the 27th of October 2021, I accepted the receipt of the skeletal remains directly from the District 12 Officer of the Medical Examiner. At the request of the medical examiner, I conducted an osteological analysis of identification and trauma. All analyses were conducted within the secure laboratory space provided to me within the District 20 Office of the Medical Examiner, 3838 Domestic Avenue, Naples, Florida, 34104, according to information provided by medical examiner personnel, the decedent was positively identified via dental comparison as Mr. Brian Laundrie, born 18th of November, 1997. Case narrative. At the request of the District 12 Medical Examiner's Office, I reported to the discovery location 6968 Reisterstown Road, Northport, Florida, 34286 on the 21st of October, 2021, at approximately 1 p.m., Florida Gulf Coast University Human Identity and Trauma Analysis HITA Laboratory Coordinator Mickey David M.S. accompanied me. Upon my arrival, FBI Special Agent Loretta Bush escorted Ms. David and I through the scene, highlighting the areas, zones 1, 2, and 3, where human and possible non-human remains had been discovered and flagged. I identified the non-human skeletal remains which were collected by the FBI. I reviewed in situ and specimen photographs of the human remains to create a preliminary skeletal inventory while at the scene. At my request, each zone was excavated to sterile soil approximately 6 centimeters deep using clean Marshalltown trowels, Fisker clippers, dustpans, and flat shovels. All of the leaf litter and soil was placed into clean 5-gallon buckets and sifted through 1/4-inch screens onto a tarp, figures 1 and 2. This process led to the discovery of 9 cranial fragments, 2 maxillary central incisors, and 1 distal hand flange. On the 22nd of October 2021, I attended the autopsy and assisted the medical examiner with the skeletal inventory. On the same day, I accepted receipt of these remains for subsequent analysis. Estimation of post-mortem interval. According to the information provided by the medical examiner and law enforcement personnel, this decedent left his home on the 13th of September 2021. A missing persons report was filed on the 17th of September 2021. Upon my initial examination, these remains were skeletonized and lacked the odor of decomposition. Small amounts of thin, dry cartilage were observed on many of the long bone joint surfaces. Auricular surfaces of the ossa coxae and sacrum and vertebrae. Dry adiposity was observed on elements of the hands and feet. These observations informed my estimation of post-mortem interval. The post-mortem interval was estimated using a submerged remains equation following Heaton and colleagues 2010, with water temperature data from the Shakit Creek USGC station. Mean water temperature equal to 28.9 degrees Celsius, and a total aquatic decomposition score for these remains, TADS, equals 8. The postmortem interval was 47.4 days to 672.4 days, or approximately 1.5 months to nearly 2 years, Appendix B. I also calculated a postmortem interval using the Voss 2011 equation for surface scattered remains using an average ambient temperature of 26.1 degrees Celsius squared, average humidity 79.6%, and maximum decomposition score. The maximum postmortem interval of 60.05 days was produced, Appendix B. These findings must be interpreted with caution because these studies have not been adequately tested in Florida. Skeletal inventory and minimum numbers of individuals. The individual was remarkably complete, Figure 3, Appendix B. The cranium was fragmentary and comprised 35 fragments. The cranium was reconstructed using Duco cement. Post-reconstruction, 8 cranial fragments ranging in size from 2 centimeters to 4 centimeters in maximum diameter from the sphenoid and orbital plate of the frontal could not be reattached. All of these remain present for analysis, were morphologically consistent with irregular duplication. These were the remains of one individual, Figure 3. In addition to the human skeletal remains that were analyzed, non-human remains were also recovered, specifically the incomplete skeletons of 2 boar and A metapodile from Bos Taurus cow bull were present. N equals 135 elements, Appendix B. Age. Macroscopic analysis of these remains was conducted to estimate biological skeletal age at death. The following age-related changes were observed. All secondary centers of ossification were completely fused, which indicated that the decedent was an adult. The midline and lateral cranial sutures were evaluated following Mindel-Lovejoy. This method produced age ranges of 28 to 44, with a mean age of 36 years, and 20 to 42 years with a mean age of 31 years for the midline and lateral sutures, respectively. The incisive suture was evaluated following Mann and colleagues 1987 and consistent with an age of greater or equal to 25 years. The pubic symphysis was the most similar to the Suchi-Brooks male 1990 phase 2, age range 19 to 34 years with a mean age of 26.5 years. The auricular surfaces were most consistent with Lovejoy's et al.'s 1985 stage 2, age range 25 to 29 with a mean age of 27 years, figure 5. The 2.1 transitional analysis was conducted using the analysis of the cranial sutures, pubic symphysis, and auricular surfaces. The program calculated an age range of 16.3 to 25.1 years. Okay. Point estimate 20.6 years corrected for white males. Miller et al. 2002, Appendix B. This finding was consistent with Mr. Brian Laundrie, who was 23 years old. Sex. Non-metric and metric analysis was conducted to estimate the biological skeletal sex. The following male traits were observed on the cranium: the large mastoid processes, the blunt supraorbital margin, the pronounced glabella, the well-developed nuchal region with Inian hook and robust mental eminence. The ossococci presented with the following male traits: narrow subpubic angle and greater sciatic notch, tall and narrow ilium, absent ventral arc, and narrow pelvic inlet. Statistical analysis of these qualitative data estimated that these skeletal remains were male. Metric assessment using Fortis 3.1 supported the non-metric findings. Okay, and the finding was consistent with the biological description of Mr. Brian Laundrie, ancestry. Non-metric and metric analysis was conducted to estimate skeletal ancestry. The cranium presented with a long nasal spine, patent nasal sill, narrow nasal aperture, angled nasals, S-shaped zygomatic maxillary structures, Carabelli's cusps, anterior bulging transverse palatine sutures, and simple vault sutures. Statistical analysis of these qualitative data estimated that this decedent was white. Metric assessment of the cranium using Fortis supported the non-metric findings. This finding was consistent with the biological description of Mr. Brian Laundrie. Forensic stature was estimated using Fortis 3.1 and measurement of the radius, maximum length 264 millimeters, and ulna, the maximum length 277 millimeters. The program calculated forensic stature for white male ancestry groups using a 95% confidence interval as 66.2 to 74.9 inches, or approximately 5'6" to 6'2" inches. The finding was consistent with the known biological description of Mr. Brian Laundrie, who was reportedly 5'8" inches tall. Dental inventory and idiosyncratic traits. Okay. gross radiographic and microscopic examination using a zoom stereo microscope EMZ was conducted to evaluate the dentition. The following was observed. Marked dental calculus was observed with the most severe form on teeth 23 to 27. Teeth 1 and 16, the maxillary third molars were impacted. Teeth 17 and 18 had small occlusal caries. Teeth 23 and 26 had evidence of dental crowding. The central maxillary incisors, teeth 8 and 9, were labially displaced or procumbent. Teeth 4, 6, 7, 10, and 11, and 29 were lost post-mortem. Antemortem pathologic change. Gross radiographic and microscopic examination of the skeletal remains revealed the following antemortem pathological change. A Schmurl's node was observed on the superior body of T12. Accessory facets marked the sphenoid process T6 and T8. Axial developmental defects were observed and included in a bifurcated superior facet on C1, a sternal aperture, and asymmetry of the first coccygeal segment. Asymmetry of the mandibular rami and condyles was observed. An axial developmental defect with the right mandibular ramus being approximately 12 millimeters shorter than the left. The clavicles were asymmetrical, with the right being approximately 10 millimeters shorter than the left. The clavicular origin for the deltoideus muscle was more pronounced on the left more than the right. Costal cartilage calcifications were observed on the right and left ribs, 7 through 10. Gross and radiographic analysis revealed that perimortem gunshot trauma to the cranium that separated the neurocranium from the facial skeleton along the supraorbital margin. Radiating fractures were observed on most of the cranial bones. The fracture margins through the cranium were homogeneous in color. The frontal left parietal, left temporal, and left superior wing of the sphenoid presented with extensive fracturing and loss of bone, figures 10 through 13. The right parietal evidenced a near circular defect with focal radiating fractures and focal bone loss. The anterior to posterior maximum diameter of the defect was 12 millimeters as measured on the endocranial surface. Stellate fracturing traveled from the near circular defect and marked the right temporal, right greater wing of the sphenoid and frontal. The pneumatic bones of the cranial base included the temporal petrous pyramids. Basilar portions of the occipital and the body of the sphenoid were fractured. Diastatic fractures marked the right frontozygomatic suture right and the left zygomatic temporal sutures, the transverse palatine suture, and the left occipital temporal suture. The post-mortem radiography did not reveal radio-opacities consistent with bullet fragmentation. The gross radiographic and microscopic examination of the skeletal remains revealed a taphomic change, specifically post-mortem taphonomic change included evidence of carnivore scavenging, pits, punctures, and scourging, and rodent scavenging. Damage, post-mortem staining of the cortical and trabecular bone ranged in color from dark yellowish brown to reddish brown throughout these remains that was consistent with the tannic soils and water of the Myakkahatchee wetlands, isolated patches of black and red. Discoloration consistent with fungi or mold was observed on the bones of the lower extremity. Appendix B, white coloration from adherent adiposity was also observed and consistent with decomposition in a wet environment. Summary: the forensic osteological analysis for medical examiner case 21-022238-S revealed that these skeletal remains were consistent with Mr. Brian Laundrie. Ante-mortem skeletal evidence included a Schmorl's node, accessory facets on the spinous process of the T6, T8 axial developmental defects, sternal foramen bifurcated C1 facet, asymmetrical mandibular rami and condyles and coccyx, costal cartilage calcification and asymmetrical clavicles. The cranium evidenced fracturing consistent with perimortem gunshot trauma. Postmortem taphonomic change included evidence of scavenging and bone discoloration consistent with decomposition on the soils and within the waters of the Myakkahatchee wetlands. Heather Walsh Haney, Ph.D., Chair, Department of Justice Studies, Associate Professor, Florida Gulf Coast University. Report directed to Wilson Tony Broussard, M.D., Deputy Chief Medical Examiner. Okay, and these pictures are redacted. These are just listing the bones and stuff, okay? And then the different tests and the scores that they talked about. These are the tables and the appendix output. And then the literature cited. Pinellas County Forensic Laboratory, submission date, a manila envelope sealed with evidence tape containing one specimen cup containing one tooth believed to be from Brian Laundrie, one specimen cup containing one section of the proximal femur bone believed to be from Brian Laundrie, one specimen cup containing one section of the distal femur bone believed to be from Brian Laundrie. Item 2, a manila envelope sealed with evidence tape containing one swab, carton containing 2 buccal swabs from Christopher Laundrie. Item 3, a manila envelope sealed with evidence tape containing one swab, carton containing 2 buccal swabs from Roberta Laundrie. DNA analysis results from the tooth were compared to those results developed from number 2 buccal swabs from Christopher Laundrie and number 3 buccal swabs from Roberta Laundrie, and the DNA profile developed from the tooth is consistent with having originated from the biological child of number 2 Christopher Laundrie and number 3 Roberta Laundrie. The DNA profile from the tooth is 1.7 quintillion times more likely in the Caucasian population if this DNA profile is from the biological child of number 2 Christopher Laundrie and number 3 buccal swabs of Roberta Laundrie than if the DNA profile is from a randomly selected individual unrelated to the sample 2 buccal swabs of Christopher Laundrie and from the buccal swabs of Roberta Laundrie. Statistical calculations are based on 21 and 21 STR loci. Now let's see here. The tooth is consistent with being a paternal male relative of Christopher Laundrie. Paternal male relatives, yeah, Lucy, I don't know. Paternal male relatives share the same haplotype profile barring any genetic mutations. Thus, the source of item 2, the buccal swabs Christopher Laundrie, cannot be excluded as the biological father of the source of item 1, the tooth. This profile will be entered into the Combined DNA Index Systems, CODIS, in accordance with the state and national regulations where regular searches will be performed. The section of the left proximal femur, DNA analysis of that item, the proximal femur, resulted in a partial profile of a male individual. The DNA profile is consistent with the DNA profile obtained from the item 1, the tooth. DNA analysis results from B, the left proximal femur, were compared to those results developed from the buccal swabs of Christopher Laundrie and the buccal swabs of Roberta Laundrie. The DNA profile developed from the item of that proximal femur is consistent with having originated from the biological child of Christopher and Roberta Laundrie. The DNA profile from the section of the proximal femur is 3.9 quadrillion times more likely in the Caucasian population if this DNA profile is from a biological child of Christopher Laundrie and Roberta Laundrie than if the DNA profile is from a randomly selected individual unrelated to Christopher or Roberta Laundrie. Statistical calculations are based on 19 of 21 STRI loci. Okay, so then we have sections of the left proximal femur resulted in a partial haplotype, and this haplotype is consistent with the haplotype obtained from the tooth. The source of the item, the left proximal femur, is consistent with being a paternal male relative of Christopher Laundrie. Paternal male relatives share the same haplotype profile barring any genetic mutations. Thus, the source of item, the buccal swabs of Christopher Laundrie, cannot be excluded as the biological father of the source of the left proximal femur. Okay, and then the section of left distal femur. DNA analysis of the section of the left distal femur resulted in a partial profile of a male individual. The DNA profile is consistent with the DNA profile obtained from the tooth. DNA analysis from the left distal femur were compared to those that were developed from Christopher Laundrie's buccal swabs and the buccal swabs from Roberta Laundrie. The DNA profile developed from the distal femur is consistent with having originated from the biological child of Christopher and Roberta Laundrie. The DNA profile from the distal femur is 170 trillion times more likely in the Caucasian population if this DNA profile is from the biological child of Christopher and Roberta Laundrie than if this DNA profile is from a randomly selected individual unrelated to Christopher or Roberta Laundrie. The source of the left distal femur is consistent with the paternal male relative of Christopher Laundrie. Paternal male relatives share the same haplotype profile barring any genetic mutations. Thus, the source of Christopher Laundrie cannot be excluded as the biological father of the source section of the left distal femur. So the analysis performed, they put that down, the tooth, the proximal femur, the distal femur, and then the buccal swabs for Christopher and Roberta Laundrie. All items, including extracts, will be returned to the case on submitting agency for storage and final disposition. Extracts should be stored frozen. And that's from Beth Orderman, ABC MD DNA analyst. This is when the report reflects a determination of an unknown individual. All analyzed samples from known individuals submitted in conjunction with this case have been excluded from the DNA profile. Okay, so it just goes on this, and about CODIS. And now this is the odontologist. Nancy Havens, DDS, forensic odontologist, received a text October 20th, 2021 at 11:36 a.m. from Dr. Winterhalter, detective from the Office of the Medical Examiner, District 12. They request we may need your services in a case tomorrow. Are you available? I responded yes, tomorrow morning. David called me later with an 8 a.m. scheduled time at the Sarasota Memorial Morgue location. District 12 Medical Examiner's Office supplied post-mortem evidence. The maxillae supplied intact and in good condition for examination. Number 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 teeth missing from the maxillae post-mortem loss. Sockets open 1, 2, 3, 5, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 in good condition for analysis. Upper 3 molars present with limited eruption and positioned for mesial inclinations. The mandible supplied intact and in good condition for examination. Number 29, tooth missing from mandible post-mortem loss, socket open. Number 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 30, 31, 32 in good condition for analysis. Lower third molars present with eruption. Number 17, distal inclination, and number 13, mesial inclinations. Radiographs taken by Dr. Winterhalter and myself. Pictures taken by Nancy L. Havens, DDS, with a Nikon D100 digital camera. Ante-mortem record supplied by Dr. Yadeshi, Sayville Family Dentistry in Sayville, New York. The patient's last visit with Dr. Yadeshi appears to be from the chart notes from November 6th of 2014. The patient was approximately 17 years old with adult dentition. There were fully erupted dentition 2 to 15, 17 to 32, and 116 molar impactions. Orthodontic treatment was completed in 2/12/2010 per a letter in the patient's chart dated 2/12/2010 from Dr. Leon Kempner and Dr. David Ampham. There were several fully erupted teeth that had consistencies based on virgin teeth with root shapes that were identifiable on the radiographs taken post-mortem and compared with ante-mortem records. Number 2, 3, 5, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 30, 31. Number 2 had a distinct curve of mesial root towards the distal. Number 12 had an apical root, had a slight curve to the distal antemortem and postmortem. Number 13 had an apical root, had a defined curve to the distal antemortem and postmortem. Number 14 has wide spacing between the mesial buccal and distant buccal roots. Lingual root is straight. This is viewed both antemortem and postmortem. Number 21 and 28, pulp stone, seen antemortem and postmortem. Number 30 has a distinct trabecular bone pattern, seen antemortem and postmortem between the divergent roots. There are many bony patterns that are consistent antemortem and postmortem. Teeth 19 B-pit and 18 B-pit TX 12, 20, 11 with minimal decay, and 31 B-pit no decay TX 12, 20, 11 all had reported composites placed which cannot be seen in the antemortem and postmortem x-rays. This is typical of very small resin-based fillings that get hidden with the dense enamel structures of the teeth. Slight overlapping of the anterior teeth on the postmortem, but the shapes are similar to the antemortem, and this can happen after orthodontic treatment if the individual does not consistently wear a retainer. Number 1, 16 and 32 molars have mesial directed inclination, antemortem and postmortem. Number 1 and 2 are impacted. Number 17 has a slight distal inclination with an acute distal curve of the mesial root. Number 32 has 3 very distinct, fully developed roots consistent on antemortem and postmortem. Mesial root curves acutely to the distal at the apex. Central root is straight. Distal root curves gently towards the distal. The consistencies of the 24 teeth present postmortem to be compared with the antemortem records. The distinctive features are number 1, 2, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 21, 28, 30, and 32, and the intact bone to compare root relationships, proximities, and angulation, bone, height, trabeculae, and sinuses. Conclusion, the fact that the maxilla and the mandible are intact, and I was able to make direct comparisons in this identification with x-rays and chart notes. There's a high degree of certainty the victim is Brian Laundrie. The NCIC and my report is submitted by me, Nancy Havens, DDS, MBA. I am available at any time to discuss this case. All remains x-rays, postmortem and antemortem, and photos are with the District 12 Medical Examiner's Office. Most sincerely, Nancy Havens. So there you have it. There it is. And let me just see something here. So according to the report, remains at the park. We went through all the bones that were located there and all the testing that was performed and the cause of death, which we knew, the gunshot wound, self-inflicted. And we know that Brian claimed responsibility for Gabby Petito's death in a notebook. He had a box there. He had photographs. We don't know any more about that. Toxicology came back negative, but there was like very little to test, and that is about it with that. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want me to read again? Let me know. What, Robin Lane? You're not going to lie? You'd like to get rid of your... Oh. Hey, Robin. Hi, Shirley. Hi, Jeanette. Hi, Punkette. You do believe that Gabby's parents should get a chance to look at it first if it's only right. Could bring them more closure. Hi, Sour Milk and Cookies. Deborah Van Couverden. Jeanette Alicia Bisso. Henny's #1 fan. Let's see. Catnip. Hexy Ted, Tina McBriarty, Lucy, Tapered Fairy, good to see you. Haven't seen you in a long time. Mimi F, Karen. Almost his whole entire skeleton was found there, Karen, not just his skull. Yeah, Sour Milk and Cookies. Amy Celeste, easily distracted. Catherine Morrissey, how are you? How is everybody? Okay, Nana Patty. Crime Scene Cleaner. Okay, hopefully I got everybody, but that's that. And I mean, you can go back and read that if you want, and I can put this here. Here's the Google Drive that it's on. You can go and read that if you'd like. Okay, and anyway, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. I'll see you later. Okay, happy Valentine's Day. Hi, Debbie L, Elizabeth T, and everybody. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.